My name is Juan Morales-Rocha. I am one of the organizers for the Latinx Games Festival this year. Today, we're going to be having a game design panel with some amazing folks. So I'll go ahead and let each of them introduce themselves. So why don't we go ahead and start off with Elaine first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elaine Gómez, and I am a game designer at an indie studio called Elaine Media.
Awesome. Thank
Oh,
you.
and I'm also co-founder of Latinx in
Right?
Gaming.
Can't forget that.
Hello.
It's like, all right. And then we got Sandra.
I'm Sandra Honigman. I'm an associate game designer at Dot. I work on the game Two Dot specifically.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, we got John.
Hey everyone, my name is John Diaz, and I'm a technical designer over at EA working on their Frostbite engine.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So yeah, so we have some questions that all the panelists had a chance to look through before. We're going to go through these and that'll be our talk. A note for the speakers, I will say, we probably might have to go a little bit over 7 just because we were chatting, we're too into the fun, but that's okay. Should be all good. All right, so we'll go ahead and start with number 1. And again, I'll pitch this one to Elaine first. What's your name? What experience do you have? What's your current role, and any specific responsibilities that you'd like to talk about in that role as it pertains to game design?
Sure. So I guess I'll say my name again. My name's Elaine Gómez. So my experience at the studio that I've been at, it's the first studio that I've worked on in the industry, and I've stayed there for 3.5 years now. So because it's an indie studio and I'm part of a small team, my experience kind of is all over the place. My responsibilities have gone from level design to a little bit of narrative design, system design, UI, UX design. I do a little bit of everything. So my role itself is game designer and implementer. That's my role, but I get to do a little bit of everything wherever it is needed mostly. And my specific responsibilities currently, we are doing some work where I can direct a little bit of level design on a daily basis. So working a lot with my art team, which art team means 2 people. So I work very closely with our 2 artists, and also speccing out new designs and new features. So a lot of documenting, prototyping inside Unity, because that's the engine that we use for all of our projects at Elaine, and just having a lot of meetings. So even though I'm not a producer, I get to definitely produce my designs, and kind of figure out when we should move things from like a concept phase to a prototyping phase. And I definitely talk to our producer about that, of course. But I get to move things a little bit, again, because I wear many hats. So I have the responsibility of being able to do that. So that's pretty much what I do. But every day is different and every sprint is different.
Sure. Thank you, Elaine. All right, you want to go for it, Sandra?
Sure. So on Two Dots, I specifically work on the content side of things. So that means like the things that you find on the actual like Two Dots game board is what I work on. So if that's making levels to like making mechanics, um, and all that, I'm one of the people that's working on that. So like really when it comes down to like the way that I like to approach all of that, first of all, I work at a very collaborative studio. So like we have ideas and we vet through them depending on the needs of the resources that we're going to be able to get for that development of the new like mechanic or anything. So that just means like, do we have 8 weeks? Do we have 6 weeks? How much work is this mechanic or this new implementation going to be on the engineering side / the visual side? Because is it going to be visually complex? Is it going to need a lot of steps to explain? And so like after we vet all that, we talk to the team. They let us know how complex they think it is after we vetted it ourselves. And then we start production once it's approved. Something that I definitely wish I had known a little, even earlier this year, is so I feel like a lot of the times people get caught up in trying to make something look a certain way and also act a certain way when you're really starting to test any sort of like new interaction or new like piece to your actual game. Um, I think the most important thing is once you get that prototype, just make sure that when people interact with it, it's very clear what the action is and what the feedback is. Even if it looks ugly, you're not going to be able to get good feedback or very quality feedback unless you're clear in telling the player you're doing this, and then they can tell you better how they feel. And we do a lot of play testing at Dots. So that's always like really important for me to be able to decide when, with my team, when to put it in front of other people.
Awesome. Thank you. And next we got John.
Hey guys, so yeah, my name is John Diaz. My experience has been in games as a game designer. I went to school for game programming, and somehow, some way, that led me to be a game designer throughout my whole career. And so I've gravitated a lot of my experiences in missions, mission design, level design, AI systems, a lot of gameplay design, and all that has led me to where I'm at today as a technical designer over at EA, working on their Frostbite engine. And what really kind of led me there was seeing what we all get to do day to day and figuring out, okay, instead of reinventing the wheel every single project that I'm on, how can I kind of build those tools so that other designers don't have to go through those same problems once they're on to the next thing? And so for people like Sandra and Elaine, I'm doing the hard work on the engine side to make their lot, to let them be more creative. And that's what I really enjoy over at working on Frostbite. And so we work in a collaborative environment because it's a beast of a tech stack that we have to wrestle with. And so I spend a lot of my time refining our visual scripting language. Mind you, I've only got about 5 weeks over there. I just started, right? So I'm still ramping up, still learning how it all goes. But I'm surrounded by very veteran people, get to work very closely with the engineering team, the UX team that comes at me with all the data of what all the other studios are doing on all of their projects, and the obstacles and the friction points that they're running into on a consistent basis, to where I kind of like try to build and prototype little one-off prefabs and things like this to help them the next time they kind of go in that direction for a gameplay encounter or a mechanism or a mini game and things like this.
Sure. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Anything else anyone wants to add about your specific responsibilities or roles? Good. All right, cool. Thanks, y'all. All right, on to number two. So number two, what basic game design principles do you wish you knew early in your career? How has your personal experience impacted your approach to game design overall? And we'll could go ahead and start with Sandra on this one.
So I did mention this a little bit when I was talking before. But yeah, just like putting something out there and play testing it, that's something that I definitely didn't really understand that much when I was just starting. I definitely played within myself, I knew what I wanted to do, but how do other people interpret it and all that? Yeah, and like the other thing that I think is really important too is like just making sure that your team, regardless of what their discipline is like they should be able to understand what the design that you're thinking of. So like at Dots, we've well, I sort of we sort of have a way of like writing specs, and so like when I write a spec, I want to make sure that whoever's looking at it, regardless of whether they're a visual artist, another game designer, someone on QA, an engineer, any of those, is looking at it, they understand like this is what it does, this is how it's going to interact with everything else. These are the parts that are going to need to be touched in order for this to come to fruition, and how and like the important things I want to communicate to the player when this new mechanic, this new addition to the game board is made. And so just like very clearly writing that out. I use a lot of visuals so that players, like anyone who's reading it, doesn't have to read it. They can just look at the thing that says like, you connect 2 dots next to this thing, and gives you a power up. I don't know.
Mhm.
Things like that, just making sure that people can follow it.
Sure.
And yeah, definitely one of the most important things I've learned as a designer.
Awesome. Thank you. John, you want to go for it?
Oh yeah. To add on to what Sandra was saying, um, playtests are super critical, right? Like early on in my career, I made the mistake of like, okay, I'm making the game for me, and it's not hard enough, and it's not going to be fun, and it's too easy to kind of blow through it. So all that to say, um, KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Um, you who work in the game day after day for maybe a year or more obviously are going to be too good at it, right? So playtests are critical and super crucial, especially not only getting gamers, quote unquote, but as diverse a play pool as possible, right? Like you want to get moms, dads, little brothers, little sisters, everybody touching it and getting their feedback on it to make the experience frictionless, right? That's the name of the game when you're a designer, right? How can you get as most people touching it and playing it? And that's through play tests and prototyping. Um, Again, early on in my career, I was constantly trying to have all the ideas and be as solid and as kind of foolproof as possible. But it really doesn't matter. Like build a prototype as quick as possible, as simple as possible, let people play it, figure out what works, throw away what doesn't, and keep repeating that loop, right? And that's generally something I wish I knew when I first started, and it took me a few years to kind of understand that the name of the game is iteration, and prototyping and playtesting are the way to kind of achieve that.
Definitely. Thank you. What do you got, Elaine?
Pretty much the exact same thing. Like, very similar to Sandra. Like, I went to school for game design, so learning it in an academic setting or even by yourself is way different than work. And I came to find, especially with documentation, that I was very much taught to have everything like pristine and like there's you need to describe this and you need to have a document for this, when in reality, like sometimes a prototype speaks volumes. And in my team, I have learned to be able to communicate depending on the discipline and depending on the person. So being able to discern and understand that if I want to communicate an idea to an engineer, it may be simpler to you do mockups and make a prototype than write them a document or write them a spec. If I need to communicate with an executive or another designer, then it makes sense to actually write a spec and have some data and some references and be a little bit more holistic about it so that they can understand what is option 1, 2, and 3 and what are the pros and cons, right? So really understanding how to communicate my idea and my design concepts in a way that is understood by the person who's going to receive it. That definitely has been something that I have been learning how to refine every single day. And it's something that I didn't learn in school really, that I learned on the job. Um, as well as like playtesting and queuing a lot as well. So we have this thing in our studio where we present our prototypes, rapid prototypes to each other, just so that we can get feedback. And then it's a matter of getting it as quickly as possible to QA so that they can let us know, is this working? Is this even fun? Should we continue to prototype this and iterate on it? Or should we just completely stop and go back to the drawing board and come up with a better idea? So that whole process, being able to fail fast and fail often, which was something that I learned at USC in our games program. One of my mentors, definitely, that was his motto. It's like fail fast and fail often. So you better screw up now. The time to screw up now is in school, so that when you get there to your work, you can actually be more effective and think on the fly. Because a designer is a problem solver. Really, that's literally all what we do. We solve problems in a visual way in games. So how do we get you to figure out this puzzle? How do we get you to get on this mission and understand where you need to go next? Like all these are problems that we're trying to solve for you. And how do we communicate that clearly? That's what design is all about. So it's definitely been interesting to see that come to pass like in my life in two routes, right? I have to be a good communicator to my team, and I have to be a good communicator to the players. So it's definitely a very what's it called? It's a very it's a very connected world, because everything that we do impacts us in the back end, and everybody in the community in the front end. So it's very interwoven, everything's interconnected. So understanding how to best do that as soon as possible has been a huge learning experience, and I'm really happy to have been able to come this far in such a short amount of time, because I'm invested in really in that problem solving and that process of failing fast and failing often.
Definitely great advice for sure. Anyone want to add anything else? Good. All right. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. All right. On to number 3. What core skill sets do you need specific to your discipline that contributes to your role as a game designer? So, John, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Sweet. I get to follow Elaine. Yeah, I just want to follow that exact same train of thought. Is being a designer is definitely being a problem solver. It's not about making the coolest game or bringing like that dream project to life. It's about being the torchbearer of the vision of what people are going to be playing, and making sure that it's understood across every discipline as best as possible, right? Like you always have art, animation, engineering, audio, narrative. They are all special. They're the specialists in their craft, but I think it all revolves around the experience of the player on mobile, on the controller, and they need to know how they plug into that as effectively as possible. And so the designer needs to convey that. Back to Elaine's awesome point is not everyone understands the same way. So sometimes some people like to read 10-page Word docs. Other times people would much rather see a very visual flow chart or a diagram made in Visio or Illustrator. Or some people need you to kind of hold their hand through the whole experience in a PowerPoint presentation. Or in the most extreme cases, it's like, here's the game, or here's a rough prototype of what I'm thinking it should feel like. So communication is kind of the biggest thing, the biggest skill you can build, work out as a designer. I would offer maybe también to that is time estimates. Maybe I don't know. I think I've never been surprised by the amount of introverts that are in the industry. And to that point, being able to communicate to introverts, or get introverts to kind of communicate and contribute and give you feedback on your problem that you're trying to solve, right? Like the best way for any game to be as good as possible is to kind of get those different points of view and perspectives. And a lot of times you run into those personality types that are just kind of very like in their head, or need time to process, and maybe write an email or something like that, or communicate in Slack, not in person to person conversation. So there is a little bit of psychology and behavioral science to being a designer, where you're kind of like working with the person and establishing that relationship to help each other out, ultimately make kind of the best project. So all that's to say, communication in every shape and form, not just kind of being like, oh yeah, I can move my mouth and make words that you hear, right? There's many layers to that.
Sure. Thank you, John. What do you got, Elaine?
I think there are a lot of core skill sets that are good to have in game design. One on a practical sense, like as designing games, and another one as a game designer as a person, right? So exactly like John said, a game designer as a person, like good communication is critical, because you are on a team and it's not all about you, it's about the project and it's about everybody involved in the project. So understanding when to hold your mouth sometimes, like, and not say something out of line, um, understanding when to give, how to give feedback so that it's positive and constructive and not destructive and offensive to your team members. And that's another super critical skill set that I have also learned how to grapple with too, because I am Latina, and I put my emotions in everything. So sometimes, I can come in a little bit like too hot, you know what I mean? But understanding how to really tone it down so that I can give that to the person, like a team member who feels comfortable receiving the heat and understands that I'm not coming at it from, being, you know, uh, not in an offensive manner, or not trying to be, putting them down, but rather coming at it as like, you can do better, and I know that you can do better. So let's go the extra step to make this the best that it can be. But not everybody can take that. So being able to understand when you should cross that line of trust between your team member or not, that's a good skill set to have too, like having good discernment, good judgment. And definitely being a good collaborator, and knowing when to be a team member and just play the game, and knowing when you need to step it up and help your team a little bit and lead. And of course that all comes with, like, talking to your lead and your supervisor or whoever is above you, but letting them understand that, like, hey, I'm willing to I have the drive to go that extra mile to do what you need me to do, or I'm willing to take on a little bit more work so that I can lift some of the other stuff that's on the plate from other people that perhaps they don't have as much time that I do. Like, understanding when to take initiative, I think that's really great, especially on a smaller team like what I am on, right? Because we all have our plates full, but sometimes we can take from each other's plates so that we can help each other. So that's as a game designer as a person. Now, game designer as a profession, like actual the day-to-day job, I would say being good to communicate, like John said, like whether that's visually or text-based or doing a mock-up, doing a prototype, understanding how to communicate your idea and your core concepts. That's one great skill set to have. And then it's super needed. Another one is I have found, at least in my career, that knowing how to program a little bit has allowed me to really help my team, and I have become a good asset, a great asset to my team, because I can come up with a concept, roughly prototype it, have it be functional, and the engineers can take it once the idea is approved. They can take it and iterate on it, and they don't have to do something from scratch. They understand what to do based on that little prototype that I made that's functional, and they can optimize and add to it and things like that. So that has been a skill set that has helped me so much. And I've invested time outside of work to refine that skill set, because it's really helpful even in my own indie projects, where I can do things myself and I don't have to right away hire a contractor who's an engineer to help me make my idea. Like, I can do that on my own. And it's transferable skill, because I can do it in Unity, and then I can do it in Unreal, and I can do it in Construct, I can do it in Game Maker, because all those concepts are very similar and they translate. Um, and another thing, as a game designer, another skill that I have learned that has been super helpful to me has been understanding UX, the user experience, and that's not just like UI UX on screen, like 2D art. I'm talking about like accessibility. I'm talking about thinking about player archetypes and player patterns. Can there be more than one solution to what I'm doing right now? Can a player do things non-linearly versus linearly? Like, really starting to think about how I can make my game uh, a good experience to more than one person and not just me. That has been something that I've been learning, that I'm really super passionate about, and I have come to find that it really does make my game designs and the game project as a whole so much better when all those things are interwoven into design from the get-go, and it's not something that we add later on. It's like, oh, we have to think about players who are colorblind. Maybe they can't see this yellow or this orange color. Like, being able to discern all those things from the beginning makes our experience so much better for our players. So that has been something that I really I have been encouraging a lot of my game design friends to pursue is just start thinking about accessibility and the player experience from the get, so that you don't have to worry about it later because you integrated it into your design.
Thank you, Elaine. A lot of good stuff there for sure. And then Sandra, what would you like to add?
I mean, John and Lane said all the things that I did want to say, especially about like being able to give feedback as a game designer on a team, being very empathetic about that. I think in general, game designers have to have some sort of like empathy, not just for the people you're working with, but also your players. And I think that goes in with what Elaine was saying about accessibility. Just understanding like the types of emotions that you are making when you're making any sort of gameplay. So if it's like this, if you're making an interaction where the player has to do a little too much work for very little reward, in that scenario, you would want to like try and put yourselves in that position and just think about like, hey, Emma, is this fair for the player? What are they going to think? And so on. But that's all I would like to add. That was awesome from both of you.
Yes, great job, y'all. Ooh, do you hear the sizzle in the background? I
Yeah.
was like,
What's that?
Just like I didn't close my door. Got me back. I was like,
Okay.
I still haven't had dinner.
Me neither.
Smells bomb. It's like there's chorizo and potatoes in the kitchen right now.
Oh, so good.
I was like, ooh, all right, y'all. Thanks. That was great. All right, on to number 4.
I was gonna probably
yeah.
I wanted to echo some of the
Yeah,
stuff
please,
they said, 'cause
yes.
it was like really awesome. Where we were. Okay, so Sandra had an excellent point. Empathy. That's been a word that I've kind of been studying and learning and incorporating and like reading up on, and it for sure 1,000,000,000% applies to game design or game development. Team player is empathy, but definitely as a developer, empathizing with the player, right, will just kind of give you a whole different perspective. What Elaine was saying about giving feedback and taking feedback and working on that really hit me in the feels, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely been through like the, oh, here's the control, play it, right? And it's like, I think I muted myself. But the controller smashes on the floor, and I'm just like, and it breaks my heart. I'm like, what happened? What happened? Was it that bad? Because some people are just not used to knowing what that feels like, and that can be detrimental to someone's self-esteem, right? So like, the more you work on giving it and even getting it, it just helps, right? Because you can either build someone up and encourage and motivate them, or you can kind of break them down to the point where they kind of lose that creative juice and influence, right? So that's a huge point that Elaine called out there. So I just want to make sure that kind of resonates with people. And definitely programming. I come from a programming background, and somehow, some way, that kind of led me into design and technical design, being kind of this middleman between both disciplines. But I love hearing that, and I love encouraging that for everybody. If you have a programming foundation, it can only help. There hasn't been a single part of game development where C# and Unity, Python, any visual programming, Blueprint and Unreal, what have you, just being able to quickly do something for yourself to, again, prove your point or get someone to feel what it's like, or the kind of giving your programmer that better idea of like, okay, I'm going to take this and optimize it in code, right? Like it's a huge head up. And even when you're designing, when you understand what's going on in the back end, there's a better marriage there between what you're both trying to accomplish. So that's a great call out for sure. So, and
Definitely.
I just want to say, and be curious. Like as a designer, just being curious in your day to day when you're out there, being like I was working on like some procedural tree generation tech or whatever, and I kid you, I've never looked at tree leaves and branches before until I had to kind of like nudge and change values to kind of get the branches to like bend in weird ways. And ever since then, I kind of walk, when I walk my dog, I look at trees and I'm like, oh, look at those leaves. They're like down and to the side. And I wonder why. And so all that to say, be super curious about in the environment, nature, city architecture, animals, organisms, scuba diving, right? Shout out to your game. Shout out to that Beyond Blue. But like when you're watching movies, when you're reading books, when you're out there in the world, just be curious about like, I wonder how that happens. I wonder what makes that work, or how traffic lights work. And you get to bring that all that back into games, right? Into virtual building, into virtual design.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like a lot of people don't understand that the more interdisciplinary you are and the more interest you have, the better designer you are, because you can get inspired by so many things. And I definitely come from a background that's not typical in game design. So I grew up like I was straight up into music. So even though I grew up, playing games, like I love games, sure, that's typical of like everybody in game dev. But to me, growing up, I would much rather be at a show, like in a mosh pit, rocking out, than playing a game. That's literally how I grew up with. Like music is in my family. Like almost all my cousins play an instrument. A lot of people in my family sing. My mom sings, my dad sings, my brother plays bass, my other brother plays drums, I sing, and that was something that I grew up with. And I didn't grow up with D&D because that was never in my sphere of influence. I never grew up with board games. And my first console was an N64. I missed on a bunch of stuff prior. And my dad didn't get me anything else other than a PlayStation 2. So I literally had 2 consoles. That's it growing up. And I missed out on a lot of things that a lot of game devs and designers had access to and are passionate about now. But to me, that's never been a hindrance because, in fact, I think way outside the box in comparison to some of my game design friends because I was never exposed to those things. So in my head, I'm not like, oh, an RPG needs to be designed this way and the systems need to be like XYZ because that's how Skyrim did it and that's the way that it works. Like to me, I'm like free. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if we could do this really cool thing with light and shadow and a day night cycle instead. And everybody's like, whoa, like how do you like come up with those really weird ideas? And I'm just like, because it's things that I like. Like I don't know what to say. Like I think the more things you like, architecture, music, like because I love music so much, I implement audio right away, even in my prototypes. So I sell my ideas a lot better because I can craft the full experience with the design of the audio and the UI and everything all together, and I can show it to my team like all in all its glory, right? Of my little puny prototype. But it helps so much because it brings that experience to life, you know? And architecture has been an amazing thing to have when it comes to level design. Concepts that I didn't know mattered, like form follows function, is like a thing in architecture. So now I can bring that into my level designs. I can be like, okay, like let's make this with purpose and intent so the player understands, and it's not this maze that we're making with no landmarks for them to understand. It's an actual living, breathing level that it's organic and they feel good in. So all those things don't come from game design necessarily. They don't come from any of the books that I ever read. They don't come from necessarily the games that I played, but they come out of things that I enjoy. And because I enjoy them, I read about it. And because I read about it, they're in my head and that's how they come into my design. So it's really interesting to be able to dive deep into all of our interests, whether it's painting, gardening, computer building, like building computers, or even like mechanics, like in cars, like putting things together, like those are all systems. So if we think about all those things and how we can bring them into our bucket, our game design bucket, and pick and choose those tool sets when we need them, like guarantee 100% your design is going to be so much better than whatever is typically being done, because you're pushing the boundaries of what defines game design. What does defining a puzzle mean to you? So all of those things can be inspired by so much, and that's helped me quite a bit. And it's really made me fall in love with game design and game development because I don't feel that I need to do something because it's been done before. I am inspired to get outside the comfort zone and figure out how to do something really cool that is an experience, and it's not necessarily just the sake of it just being a game and being a gamey experience instead, you know. So that has been awesome to see throughout my career, and I encourage everybody, like, just get out and do things that you love, learn new things, and don't get stuck in this routine of I need to play D&D and I can only play games that are in the genre of my job, or I can only play RPGs because that's the only thing that I like. Like, no, get outside your comfort zone. Like, do cool shit. Can we curse? Do cool stuff.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I do want to, I don't know if it's adding to it, but uh, I work at a place where like we already have a game that's very established. So the type of design that you would do isn't as free. So for example, like if you already have a game and these are your rules, you can't really like go beyond that thing. So like on Two Dots, the things that you do is you're connecting. That's the main interaction the player is ever going to do. And you have a set of moves. And when those moves end, you basically lose that level. So um, if you're making a new game, there's definitely like that freedom. I think when you're looking at games that are already much more established, I think studying competitors does come in handy. I think especially on a product that doesn't, for a product that's trying to contain its players. So basically, it's not just about downloading the game and then playing a bit of it. It's like you have to make those players stay for a very long time. There's people who have been playing Two Dots since it came out in 2014, which is crazy. Like games that are finite don't have that. So we have to keep thinking about like different things to add to the game that are going to keep the player in there. And so like I agree, like doing a lot of like outside the box stuff and studying that stuff is very helpful. I think for a game that's more established, you have to look at your competitors and see who's keeping those people around. So it's just really interesting to see like different ways you might think about design. Because for me, it's like study what other games are doing. This game is in the top 100 on the App Store. This game is not. What is it doing wrong? Is it the metaphors? Is it that their fatui is really bad? Is it that this fatui is really good? Is it that the story here is strong? Is it the story here is weak, etc.? So you're like always studying what your competitors are doing because you're competing for that same audience. So that's just the difference.
I think that's an awesome point. That's a really, really good point, Sandra. And also as well, like something that I thought about just now too is understanding that even though you can think outside of the box, you need to constrain it anyway for your game. Like for example, in Beyond Blue, I could think outside of the box, but our game's about the ocean. So we need to keep it in that realm. I can't just be like, oh yeah, wouldn't it be really cool? We just did this really cool outer space thing and like we launched one of our drones into the sky and like there's definitely rules like Sandra said that we have to adhere to depending on the project that we're in. Luckily for me, we can go a little bit more experimental and push the envelope because of the nature of our projects. And yes, I would agree that established projects, yeah, there's a lot of more constraints that you need to think about. And if you change stuff too much, then you ruin it for the players too. So it's really understanding what is also too little versus too much and what is just balanced and just right for your game. And again, it's like that whole thing I said before, it's all problem solving and trying to figure out what's the best approach for your project and like what your team wants and what your player base is expecting from your game.
Definitely. I think we kind of slid into number 4 there, so that's great. I was like, it's perfect progression. So, yeah, so number 4 was basically like, how do you balance the creative flexibility with your responsibility to maintain the game's identity and serve the player's needs? So you're already shifting on that side. So John, do you have anything to add? And then we could, if anyone else has some other thoughts on there, we could go to that.
Yeah. I was curious about this one in the prep, I was like, I wonder what, Sandra or Elaine would say about it. I'm trying to think about definitely like in an established game or genre, right? If you think about like a first person shooter and you want to really break the mold or go way out of the box, there's a balancing act there when players kind of come into the expectation of like, hey, my triggers, shoot or throw grenade or something like that, right? And my thumbsticks kind of look around and move, and you want to come at it and be like, hey, I want to change it all, right? I want to flip the controller, I want to make them do something. And so there's definitely a balancing act to be done there with in terms of design, like, hey, why do we need to change it? Is it something in our game that would work better because of that, or you just want to change it for change's sake, right? It's kind of careful. So to the point that Sandra and Elaine were making, that definitely competitive analysis is vital to what we do, right? You can't just kind of come at it ignoring everything that's been established already, right? Because that's going to kind of feel alien to people and be a friction point. But I'm just going to go play the other one that kind of does it the way I expect it to be done. But that's not to say that there isn't a way for you to bring something new to the space, right? That's grounded in, UX or reality or something like that, right? Like I'm thinking maybe not the best examples, but when you think to like an Apex Legends or something, and you think of a game like Mirror's Edge, right, that are, for all intents and purposes, both first-person shooters. It's just that one, you don't really shoot, you don't have a gun, right? But and even the controls there, now you're replaced with jumping on the thumb buttons or the triggers, and so things like that. So there's uh, something there to researching, playtesting, UX, right? Because I think when Mirror's Edge came out, it felt alien to a lot of people. A lot of people picked up that controller and were like, what am I doing? How does this work? But it was a new space. It was a creative space for a studio that was kind of like looking for a creative outlet. To your point, Sandra, right? If you've been making a certain type of game for iteration on iteration, it's a very welcome opportunity for a studio or a team to be able to kind of venture out and flex and stretch a little bit and challenge those creative muscles to think outside the box of kind of an untouched space, right? So I think I would offer that to say, it's important to kind of give your team an opportunity to flex creatively. And, I think inner studio game jams are a fantastic way to do that, right? To kind of build that team camaraderie. And what I love about doing that is kind of shifting roles, right? Like, all right, I'm going to go engineer, you be designer, right? Or I can't draw for anything to save my life, but I'm going to go dabble in Blender and try to make some assets, right? And you get to be like an audio guy or something like that. But yeah, I don't even know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think you covered it. Anyone I want to add anything else to balancing? Your own creativity.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit. So just to go back to like out of the like I love when at Dots and on Two Dots specifically, we have that opportunity to be a little more creative. So I think an example is I think 2 years ago, maybe was it 2 years ago? 2017. Maybe it was 2018. Regardless, we had an idea to do for our birthday to do a set of mini games. Those set of mini games eventually became what we call now our scavenger hunt feature. So it was basically literally a mini game within Two Dots that's very, very different from our main game. It's not something that that any like other casual puzzle game in our genre does. And it's become one of our most successful features. So like that came out of like people just being really enthusiastic about like other types of like gameplay, because the scavenger hunt is basically you have a map, it's very cute, and you're finding things in the map, and then the map expands. So yeah, just finding those ways to be able to like add those things that are not really being done. If you have the flexibility, if you're able to take those risks at the time that you're developing.
I'm curious about that one because that seems like a rare opportunity, and I'm curious like how that came up.
You mean the scavenger hunt?
Yeah, like it feels like, hey, a brand new feature that's completely different to what you're doing in the
Yeah.
game that we're gonna tack in now.
Yeah, it was basically just it was going to be a one-off to basically celebrate our 4-year anniversary. But it was really popular, so we brought it back. In order to sustain it, we did add some like things to help monetize it so that we could keep working on it because we had to hire people to just work on that basically. But it was just literally we just sat in a room and it was a random it wasn't just the game designers, it was everyone on Two Dots. We all just sat down and we threw ideas at the wall and we were like, oh, we like this, we like that. And then one of the engineers outside of the Two Dots Unity project created basically a set of mini games. And we decided to go with the scavenger hunt. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's always interesting to me the way that we keep games alive after they're released now with things like that, with whether it's like an update, whether it's a DLC, whether it's like a new feature in the game. um, that creative flexibility is it's difficult, right? When you're trying to like you understand from a business perspective that you want to keep the game alive and you either want to monetize it or have players, invest in like the DLC, and like make that paid. But as a designer, not keeping the business side of it, not allowing that to be a hindrance because it can be if you start thinking about it, be like, well, I don't want to milk the players. Like, screw that. Like, obviously, I need my job, so I have to do as I'm told. But it's also like trying to figure out how to creatively solve for that monetization issue or the idea of like, hey, some players left us some negative reviews. How do we creatively bring a solution so that we can fix some of those things that they would like to be fixed? Like, for example, once we released Beyond Blue for us, one of our biggest asks was a photo mode. And we sat down with ourselves and we're like, do we really need a photo mode in our game? Like that does nothing to gameplay for our purpose. And we decided to go for it and it ended up being really nice and people really liked it. So it's like one of those things that you have to weigh the pros and cons and see what people are doing, but at the same time keep in mind what your game is about. Sometimes what people may ask not doesn't necessarily make sense for the project, right? So take every piece of feedback as a grain of salt, and don't change everything about your game or add things to your game that are not a necessity just because people want them to be there. Like you have the discernment as a designer, and your team can back you up in these decisions sometimes too. So yes, like the players are super important to us, like that's the reason why we all have jobs, but at the same time we also need to take all the feedback and figure out how best to implement it and when it should and should not be implemented and when it should be considered but for the next project or like the next iteration of something, and that definitely that balancing act between something that's live versus something that's not, like that's critical, right? Because that can make and break that project, right? If you decide to do something that's like not cool with the players, or if you put up a feature that you thought was going to be good and now everybody's like, ew, this is gross, I don't like it. It's kind of like how we saw how Google has changed all the icons for everything and everything looks the same and it's trash.
I don't like it.
Correct.
Me neither.
I don't like it.
I cannot tell anymore what's what. But I do hate the Gmail one the most.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I think there's definitely something there to games as a service or live games or even, one-off games to allow some room for flexibility there, power to your tools developers. But definitely, like, if you err on the side of player expression, that will always take you a long way, right? Like allowing people to take pictures, put them up on a server, or buy a bunch of cosmetic things that they can like stunt and flaunt and like put selfies online and stuff like that, I think is kind of the rave. uh I always like to cite Fortnite, right? Like the first version of Fortnite was insanely different from the game that it is today, right? Like before they kind of put in battle royale mode, and now they are enjoying the success of that game that's been out for what, like 4 years now, still going hard on Twitch. So where you can, to Elaine's point, be flexible to respond to your player base, right? Or even kind of shift player base. Right? It's not resonating with that group. Let's take it over here and see how it sticks.
Definitely. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. All right. On to number 5. Can you share a specific example of how you had to articulate potential design changes that may not mesh well with leadership's ideas for what the game should be? We could go ahead and start with Elaine on this one.
Oh
I'm so
man.
glad you're going first.
So I have the pleasure of working very directly with our CEO, who also is our creative director. And I say pleasure because he has so much wisdom, and he definitely, I value his perspective because he comes from a film background. So he sees everything very visual, very cinematic. At the same time, bringing honing that perspective of like everything being spectacular and being like, oh, we scope. Like scope, guys, like we only have 5 mechanics, like reel it back into reality. That has been hard, right, to do, because you want I don't want to cross that line of being the party pooper or being the person who's like, this is unfeasible, we can't do this, like don't even think about it, because I'm talking to the CEO of the company. So that has been a big challenge for me, like as a woman specifically, because I feel like there's this fear of talking, because I don't want to be put down. I don't want to be shushed. I don't want my ideas to just be thrown out there and just disregarded, right? There's that fear of being like a woman in a room full of dudes. And it does happen, right? Even if it's not even on purpose. Some people don't even realize that they do it, and they do it. Um, so definitely grappling with that has been a challenge for me personally, like finding the right words to say, very respectfully countering something, and having my team members, including the CEO, understand that the reason why I'm countering it is not because your idea sucks. It's because there's good reasons, whether that be from a UI UX perspective, or a feasibility perspective like scope, or understanding what are the systems that we have, and let's reuse these systems instead of creating new ones. Trying to reel my team members in, back in from their crazy ideas sometimes definitely can be challenging. So I definitely think that articulating myself, like using the right words, um, watching my tone when I say these things, has been critical. So that I can, instead of making them feel like I'm shutting their ideas down, I can maybe help compromise and bring some of their ideas with some of mine and meet them in the middle, and then we end up having a good solution to whatever it is that we want to accomplish, right? So for me, a very specific example that happened very recently was in this idea that we have with coral reefs. So there's not much that you can do with coral reefs, right? Because they're like rocks. And I didn't know much about coral reefs specifically, like actual coral, until just like 2 weeks ago. So our CEO was like, you know what? Let's all do research on coral. Read, watch stuff, see what you come up with, and then we'll reconvene. So I was like, all right, cool. And I watched Chasing Coral, a documentary on Netflix about coral, and I cried. I didn't understand that coral are actually animals. And what you see is actually their protective shell, and they come out at night, and they're these beautiful little creatures with little tentacles, and they're amazing, and they're getting killed because of global warming. So now it's like, okay, I now understand coral. So what is technology that is saving coral? So now I went into the rabbit hole of TED Talks on YouTube and seeing like amazing work from all these doctors across the world, and finding the coral reef survey records now, and these awesome amazing things that people are doing to document the coral. So now I'm inspired, right? And now I can bring it to the table to my CEO. Hey, these are all the technologies that are being out there. Here are some things that we can actually adopt and put in our game with systems that we already have, so that we can build content around that. And that was super interesting to see, right? Because I had my own ideas, the CEO has ideas, and then our other lead designer has his ideas, and trying to bring everybody's perspective and ideas together. That's now going to be my job for the next couple of weeks, is bringing all those ideas to fruition and coming up with different tactics to figure out what's our best direction. And that all came from being told, like other people may have felt maybe even a little bit offended by being told, you guys haven't been doing work the past couple of weeks, like y'all trash, like what have you been doing, why are you even here? Like I'm not saying the CEO said that, because he didn't. But I'm just like building up a hypothetical sense, right? Like maybe that's kind of like the state that we were in a little bit, trying to figure out what are we going to do next. And being able to be told that, but not let that put me down. Instead, letting it be a positive catalyst for me to do research and find things out and be re-inspired. Like that's what it's all about, right? So it's, how are you going to take it? How are you going to take the feedback? Are you going to let it weigh you down, or are you going to keep going? So for me, it's like I have to keep going, right? Regardless of what anybody says. Maybe it was something that I didn't like to hear. Maybe it was getting a little bit on the blue side, down in the dumps, because I had presented some ideas that we're just not going to go with. But it's fine. It happens in game dev. Things are not your babies. you have to keep going. So definitely it has been interesting for me personally when you have leadership that is your direct supervisor. A lot of people do not have that they don't have to deal with that. They don't have to deal with an executive being the person that they answer to every day. But that's been my experience. However, I can easily take that to my next job, or if I go to build my own studio. Now I understand that so much better, because my vocabulary and my tone, I've had to fix it, because this person who's authority is the person that I look up to every single day, who I have to communicate with, who has been in the industry for so much longer than me, who is much older than me, right? So it's different than if Sandra and I were on the same team together and we just riff off ideas of each other and then bring something up to a lead who may be like 5 years older or 10 years older than us. It's a different dynamic completely, especially when you deal with somebody who is a filmmaker, not necessarily a game developer. So how do I help them understand some game design concepts and theories so that they can be on board with my idea or the idea of my fellow designer? So those are all things definitely every day that you have to refine. Sometimes you want to cry because it's harder than what it should be. Um, but you can't let that dissuade you, right? I always tell people, like, if there's a will, there's a way, right? If you really love this and in your job, you're gonna find a way to help get that other person into your boat so that they can understand where you're coming from. And even if they don't understand where you're coming from, at least you shot your shot, and that's what's important. Even if your idea is not the one that people decide to go with, even if you make a prototype, you spend like 3 weeks on it, and now it's like in an archive somewhere on the team's like cloud server, which has happened to me. um, that doesn't matter, because it's not about you. It's about the project. and use those as building experiences so that you can get even better and better and better as a designer. And you can climb up that ladder and prove yourself, go to senior level if you want to, go to lead and become a creative director. Like all those skills built on top of each other. And yeah, I guess that's all I'm gonna say. Sorry, I spent so much talking on that.
No worries. A lot of knowledge to share.
Don't you apologize, Elaine. You own that.
Yes.
You own that advice.
Who wants to go next? Anyone want to go off of Elaine?
Sandra, you had something?
I don't think I have that much to say. I think when we at Dots, when there's something that we don't like, we usually like talk about it within our direct team. So with the 2 Dots game designers, we would talk about something that we might not like that happened. That doesn't usually happen. I will say that at Dots, we're very, like I mentioned, very collaborative, and we try our best to get everyone's voices heard. So like every 2 weeks, we actually have a retro, and every time we finish any sort of mechanic or feature or new thing that is made, we have a retro. And retros are just times when everyone just voices things that went well, that didn't go well, and that and things to do in the future. So yeah, that's what we do at Dots. And I think it's really made our the environment we work at very open. Although it's not like super open where we're just like saying everything, like you're still professional, and there's still a hierarchy, of course, that we have to adhere to.
So you gotta watch your mouth, Sandra.
Sometimes I do. But with the people I work directly with, I feel like we can we can like talk and think of like the things that we might feel strongly about versus the things that we are not liking about what's happening with the product. Of course, everyone has their opinions, especially when there's investors and outside forces involved.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd like to offer some of my experiences just being a designer, right? It happens on larger teams. I'm not going to name companies, but when you are a new team assembled of people who've come from other studios and have done things very differently, and then you're putting those alternate universes together to make a new game, you're gonna run into hurdles, right? Like when things are hitting the fan and deadlines are looming and decisions have to be made, under the pressure, you're gonna revert to what you knew worked on your last team, on your last project. And it's hard, right? I'm human. It's hard to combat those instincts. And acknowledging that, like you guys kind of were alluding a bit to, right? There's a give and take, there's a compromise. My frustration kind of manifested itself in that there's a leadership kind of discussion or meeting where it's like, okay, here's the vision, here's how I want it to play, here's the feature. And we all kind of sign off on like, okay, cool, this is what you want. I'm gonna go and put it through its paces. And I review it with all my peers, right? I review it with my strike team. I review it with my other systems designers, and it makes sense to them. It plays nicely with all the other systems in the game, and taking it back to director or leadership, and then kind of it, getting torn up, or it doesn't make sense, or there's like a friction point, and just kind of understanding or having to wrestle with like, okay, that person's not getting it. What am I missing? Going back to my team, running it through them again, getting that validation, getting that confirmation. And honestly, just going back with a different spin on it, right? So to go back to our earlier point of like, here's a Visio diagram or here's a Word doc, and it doesn't resonate. So like I put in a PowerPoint and I kind of laid it out very sequentially and kind of built off previous mechanisms and systems. And it also kind of helped me flesh out my thinking, because if you're not challenged, right, you can get kind of complacent. and be like, oh yeah, it makes sense to everybody, right? You should just get it, right? And that's it's kind of the wrong thinking on a big team. So rebuilding it or putting it in different clothes, putting in a different bata, and like putting it out there um, helped kind of drive that through. But all that to say, I definitely had to check myself with my teammates to make sure, like, am I talking out of my ass? Like, what am I not seeing here? Does this not make sense, right? And understanding, getting that kind of thumbs up. No, it makes sense, but keep at it. Um, so that's kind of how we. But I definitely love retros, Sandra. Like, those are an amazing asset to anybody in any team, right? To be able to kind of, however long your sprints are or milestones or whatever, to have retros and never sacrifice them, right? Like if it's like, oh my God, deadlines and the thing is coming and PAX or GDC and we gotta do the thing. It's like, no, 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 don't sacrifice your retrospectives. Like, make it a thing, build it around your culture, make it a party. But I love that open communication that it creates, right? It gives everybody a chance on the team to talk about what didn't go wrong, what went great, what should we do more of, what should we change, what should we bring back.
Yeah, and to add to that too, what John said, I think, and this is something that can go for everybody. It's not just designers, it's everybody on a game dev team and anybody who has a professional career anywhere. Don't take shit personal. Like, don't do that. And that's something that I've had to learn too, because even back in my grad school days, I remember presenting a project that like my instructor tore apart. He did not like it. And I cried. Like, I couldn't prevent my tears from streaming down my face because it was a project about like my culture. And I
Mm,
took that super personal, that they didn't understand how special it was that I had brought that to the table. Um, and he later apologized and he told me, he's like, I'm glad that you cried because it shows your emotions, like never lose your emotions. Like, it was a really nice, he was a great instructor. But that moment helped me realize that I cannot take feedback personal. Like,
hmm
just because you didn't do something right, or just because the executives didn't understand it or your other team members didn't understand it doesn't mean you're a bad designer. Like like do not think that. Just because someone didn't understand your perspective doesn't mean that you are a bad designer. And that's something that I had to uh, battle with, and like in my personal life. Like, I'm not a bad designer if I don't get this design right on the first try. Like, that's impossible with anything. Nobody gets something perfectly amazing their very first try. So be willing to be open and vulnerable and not take things personal. Take feedback as it comes and understand when it's about a project and about a design and not about you as a person. And I think that will definitely help you like go to that next level. It'll help you level up as a person and
hmm
a designer for real. And I'm speaking from experience because I suffered and I hurt. Like,
Hey,
I was bawling. Like, I was like, maybe I shouldn't be in the games industry. Maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. And when I realized that it's not about me and
hmm
it's not about my design, but it's about what's best for the project and iterating on it and making it better, refining and polishing it, that's what it's about. That's when everything clicked for me. And now it's like, I want people's feedback. Now I'm actually going on Slack and messaging everybody. Can you take a look at this prototype? Can you tell
hmm
me what you think about it? Because now I'm not, it's not about me. It's about, let's refine this. And if I need to go back to the drawing board to make it better, let's do it. And getting out of that mindset has helped me so much. Like, especially the past year, like working on a game project during a pandemic, like with our team remotely, like that has been critical because now we don't have those chances of meeting together and being face to face and having tone and all that stuff. Like, that's nothing now. It's like, document here, read this and play this and tell me what you think about it. But that's definitely been a growing pain of mine throughout the past couple of years, especially as a young designer who hasn't had like years of experience in different environments, where I haven't been, pushed down to like do better and be better, or have a mentor who takes me under their wing to help me level up. I've had to level up on my own. So it's really definitely been, it's a mind thing, and it's different for everybody. But definitely, like, do not think you're a bad designer because you didn't do something right or somebody didn't understand you.
I love that. I love that for sure. Where it's like, designers for sure, but I would say any creative role, you're gonna open your work up to criticism, right? Anything like anything creative is usually tied very closely to passion, right? You're not gonna be a game developer if you're not really passionate about it, because there's other nicer, softer, warmer jobs to get into, right? But 100%, there's a muscle there, right? Like as animals, we have that quick, fast fight or flight response. Like, here's my thing, isn't it beautiful? No, I don't like it. Instantly, it's like, what you say, like what? Or kind of, oh my God, they hated it. I suck. I'm a bad designer. But I would encourage anybody coming in, or looking for that kind of affirmation, that it is not about you. It is not about your work. To Elaine's point, I'm going to echo that times a million. That it's like, don't take it personal. There's friction there that is not resonating with the person, and our job is to smooth it out, make the game as accessible as possible, iterate on it, right? Going back to what you guys were saying, fail fast. And it's actually a great thing when somebody can unanimously, or a team can unanimously say like, hey, this is not working. So like, okay, that failed. How do we, let's move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah, and one of the things that I read very recently on Twitter, that we are conditioned as human beings to view failure as a punishment, and that's not necessarily the case. Like, failing at something makes you better at it. Like, play Celeste and you will see that you're supposed to die a million times so that you get from point A to point B. And we shouldn't view failure as, it's a bad thing. Like, I should never fail. That's something that I should not aim for. But yeah, please do. Please fail a lot because it'll help you grow, and it'll
Yep.
help you grow quickly. The people in my life who have seen their work, whether game designer or not, um, the people who are most arrogant and think they're hot shit are the people who don't fail and who don't get criticism and who don't want criticism. Like, you'll be like, "Oh, can I give you feedback on your sale?" I'll be like, "Nah, like, I'm good." And it's just like,
Hmm.
okay, cool. Your project or whatever it is you're working on will stay stagnant because you don't want to make it better. You want to box yourself into your own ideas, and whatever you say is goes. Fine. We can let you be that way. Like, I still love you. But I'm telling you, the more eyes on it there are, and
The
the
better.
more feedback you receive, the better it's going to be. It's like with anything, like, no recipe is going to be good straight from the get. Like, talk to any
Hmm.
chef. There's no way. And it's from failure of understanding, well, maybe if I put this ingredient, or maybe scratch that, maybe I need 2 tablespoons of this other ingredient. That iteration and rapid prototyping, that's what makes food delicious.
Amen. I
So,
love.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that you brought up food, right? I heard some sizzling going on in Juan's kitchen, but like, one of my creative directors, he kind of put this great analogy, right? Because a lot of people like to compare making games to making film, right? Making a movie, right? You have a lot of similar roles, and there's a director kind of leading the way, and there's a huge CG element and all this. But he put it to me in from his perspective, he was like, no, 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 making games is more like getting in a cocina and cooking collaboratively, right? You have different people responsible for different parts of the plate, right? Whether it's appetizer, dessert, entree, you have your sous chef, you have your kind of head chef, you have people tasting and mixing and matching, and it's messy in the kitchen, bro. And game development is so much like a crazy kitchen, right? Like, people in there, and throwing things into a pot, trying it out. Oh, it sucks. Starting over, mixing and matching, tweaking the song a little bit, right? Like, and so I love that image, and I love to convey that to people that always kind of wonder, what is it like making a game? Like, picture like a very crazy kitchen. If you've seen things like Iron Chef or Ratatouille or whatever like that, like picture games like that. And then at the end, you get a nice little plate. All you see when you're at the dinner table in a restaurant is a beautiful gourmet plate, and you get to eat it. Oh, it's delicious. But you don't know the madness that went on to put that together.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I hate when people see games and they only call out one person. They're like, "Oh, it's so and so's game," and it's just like, no, it was an entire team of people that made that a reality. And we say the same thing at Latinx in gaming. Some people came to me with about Unidos Online. They're like, "Elaine, you did such a beautiful job. Like, thank you so much." And it's just like, no, it was an entire team of people in the background, even people who like literally just came on for the event alone just because they wanted to help and volunteer. That's what made it a reality, and that's why we were able to do it. So it's one of those things that there are solo developers, don't get us wrong. There are people out there who make the entire game from scratch, the art, the music, the programming, they do everything, but they're far and few in between people who have all of those skill sets and can do it well. It's all teamwork, and everybody pitches in to make it better. And we fail a lot because imagine having 20 creators in a room trying to voice their opinion and everybody wants their little piece of the pie, right? Like, we need to compromise between each other, and sometimes that means having arguments. Sometimes that means like taking one person's designer over another, and feelings do get involved because we're human beings. But the important part is to discern when you need to step back and not involve yourself emotionally and personally, and just have it go as the project, as like, what's best for the team. Do I need to take an L, or do I need to step up and say something? Because sometimes it's important to say something and have people who may not necessarily understand certain things understand where you're coming from, and even if they decide not to go with that, at least you shot your shot, like I said before, and you tried to be a positive impact, right? And it didn't come out of malice of being butthurt or salty. It came out of trying to help the team make the best decision, and that's what it's really about.
Yeah, I like to take out my ill will or butt hurtness on my teammates in like Street Fighter or Smash or Mortal Kombat or something like that. Like, yo, come see me on the sticks right here real quick. After and then we'll get back to work.
Definitely. Thanks, y'all. All right, on to number 6. What tools do you heavily rely on to make your job easier, or maybe just to do your job? Sandra, do you want to start off this one?
Sure. So obviously we use Unity, source tree. But yeah, so for me specifically, like since I do a lot of like spec writing, and also like I make mockups so that it's easier for people to understand things. I actually use we use Quip at Dots. So I don't know if everyone knows what Quip is, but it's just like a place where you can store documents. And it can be pretty flexible, although it has its downsides as well. I also like using Adobe XD. So it's Adobe's uh, tool to make like wireframes and such. I use it very simply. I just like make a thing and then you press a button, it goes to the next screen, etc. Very, very useful. And I also use a lot of Google Slides basically, in order to like do little presentations. And I also use, of course, Google Sheets to store data, because I have to look at data a lot and I love color coding it. So I can see where like the places I need to keep an eye on are like all the red stuff and all the green stuff. And yeah, that's basically what I use at work.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. What do you got, John?
Yeah, like the she called out Quip. I kind of first ran into Quip at Amazon. I was like, what is this thing? And I kind of liked it. I kind of liked how you can do like inline commenting. It feels like OneNote and Google Docs, right, where you can kind of comment, highlight, go down the whole thread. But I like how it's kind of an all-in-one, like all your files, you can link and call out people, and they can kind of get emails and notifications. So it's actually kind of powerful for collaboration. I would honestly say, like, if people are looking for tools, I would tell them to go give that a shot, give it a trial. Yeah, I mean, for illustration, I really like Visio. I know there's some people out there that go hard on Illustrator, but it doesn't work for me. I don't know why. Um, some websites that I go to hardcore for assets are like Noun Project. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but they have kind of like vector images for anything, and those are so helpful for diagramming. Like, there's nothing game design related that you can't find an awesome vector image for from there, and pretty good pricing or attribution based. Spreadsheets for sure. Um, PowerPoint and slideshows for sure. Uh, Slack, right? I just finally got to a team that heavily uses Slack, right? Every place I've been, we've had some different chat programs. So I really love Slack. Like, you can search through threads, especially if you're new on a team. I'm going through things that people already yelled about like 2 years ago. So I have some context before I kind of raise it up. Like, hey, why does this work this way? So Slack's pretty sweet. Uh, the biggest thing in my tool belt, and my Batman utility belt, right, to go back to Elaine's analogy of like just keep throwing tools into your bag to whip out, is Zoom Annotate. Uh, this in the pandemic, work from home. This is the way I get my whiteboarding out. Like, I'll be like, yo, what are you doing? And I go draw on your screen and circle things and square things and kind of throw my stamp on there. So that's allowed me to get my whiteboarding needs out there. I love drawing and doodling. And so that's really effective for big teams when you're trying to kind of be like, look at that button that does, it's easy to miss. What are you talking about? Let me go circle it right on your screen. Um, I don't know what people generally use, but I'm a big fan of Snagit. And Snagit is just another screen capture device to let you kind of quickly doodle on things. So super helpful for bug reporting or making funny GIFs or whatever, right? Like, it's just like, it lets you quick, fast kind of screenshot or even take video, then cut it together and blast it off for feedback, iteration, or, just refining kind of looks, some of those things.
For sure. Thank you, John. Elaine, what do you got?
So I pretty much use what everybody else uses. At Elaine, we use Google Docs a lot. So a lot of my specs and documentation are on a Google Doc. I try to keep everything to less than 3 pages. I don't like to write a whole lot. Everybody knows that, because I'm very direct with my specs. So I always say, this is my design goal. This is the player goal that I have for this. Here's my proposed design. And sometimes that proposed design has more often than not, I present 2 to 3 design options for all of my specs. And that's just because I like to look at things from different angles. So I like to present as many ideas as possible. And that has been very helpful for my team. And I keep doing it because they like it. They like seeing that. I also have been doing a lot of UI UX mockups lately. So I was very proud. Our photo mode that was released recently, I designed that. So that was really cool. This is my first UI UX design that got released, so it was really dope. So to do that, I actually use Photoshop because all of our UI stuff, our artist has been using Photoshop, so I just use that. And then similar to Adobe XD, there's something called InVision where I can create the mockups and simulate interactions. So if I make a little button and I click on it, I can bring up a reaction of some kind. So I just use it because it's free. And there's a software that I really love called PureRef. And it allows me to make mood boards and write down notes. So when I have ideas about how something should look like or a direction that we should go in, I just paste a million pictures all around. And in there, I include whatever sketch I made and throw in my notes in there. And it's all in one nice document that I can zoom around and show my team. So that's been super helpful. As far as whiteboarding stuff, on Slack, we have been using when you share your screen on Slack in a call, you can draw on the screen. So we've been using that quite a bit for UI UX stuff that we've been doing, and like new designs to like circle things. And it helps me guide especially engineers who sometimes like are clueless when it comes to design stuff. It helps me help them understand what we're trying to do and what we're trying to change and things like that. So I think those are the major ones. I also use Discord a lot. And that's because I like to communicate with friends while I'm working too. It helps me stay sane, especially now during the pandemic. So having Discord up and running, just quickly being able to check in on my friends, checking in on like Latinx and gaming and see what everybody's doing. If anybody needs anything, I'm always available on there. So it's nice to just have it open as a open communication instead of being on my phone. That way it's on the screen and I can still work and stuff while it's still going. But yeah, and of course Unity, because that's where we make our games. So I need Unity up all the time to do stuff.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Awesome. All right. On to number 7. Do you have any key takeaways or advice for building effective and transparent communication within a team? We could start with you, John, on this one.
Sweet. I get to take all the answers before Elaine and Sandra get to them. No, I think there's been a very powerful one that kind of was worth its weight in gold. And this is very dependent on what time you come into a project, right? Like if you come in from the ground floor, you're usually good. For someone who is kind of onboarding, maybe in the middle of production or development, something that I found to be very helpful I'm a very visual person, was there was I want to say like a CG mock film of the core gameplay of the game. And so this is before we had anything built out or any assets or anything like this. And we showed it to everybody who was coming new onto the team. And it kind of immediately helps them kind of sink in with the game you're trying to build, how it's going to work. And we all kind of instantly establish a cohesive language when speaking about the gameplay, specifically around gameplay. And even there was like some HUD and UI elements in there as well. And just seeing, we would also kind of show multiplayer, for instance. You would see kind of the gamer tag, so instantly already kind of engineers are thinking about like, okay, how do I make this work for 4 players, or take it online or cross-platform or whatever, right? So that thing, granted this was a big team, big publisher, pretty big budget, however much it cost, it was really worth it for the production of that game, right? Because you could show it how at whatever point, and developers would kind of understand immediately off the back, like, okay, this is the type of game we're making, and can always speak around that. Because I think that's something people take for granted on teams is I can tell you the game we're making, but the little sim bubble in your head can be a totally different icon than the sim bubble in my head. And when we're making decisions or implementing, they don't align, right? So having something visual in motion in a movie, and I've even seen versions of it that are like you're cutting together Twitch streams or YouTube videos, right? Just to kind of get the vibe of the game you're trying to make. So I think that's a great way to establish the base level language for your game, right? In its entirety. I know the experience has taught me that the best design docs, when you're kind of at the end or in the middle of development, kind of get like buried or thrown away or kind of disregarded or not maintained or updated. In my experience, I know that you guys way better experience. Your design docs are tight, they resonate all the way through the end. But for me, there's been a high value to have a very lightweight doc, right? To Elaine's point, something short, sweet, that kind of conveys the message up front And then there's like a FAQ or something you could read for the nitty gritty details if you're like engineering or you're in the kind of low level nuts and bolts. But having that be front and center somewhere that's like one click away, or start at the top of your Google Drive, or at the top of Quip, that is easy to access, and somebody's maintaining it, right? It's somebody's job, producer, designer, whatever, that is maintaining that, kind of at a quick glance kind of gives the core of the game. As again, a way to kind of keep communication consistent across the team, because as the bigger the team gets, it's kind of that telephone game, right? Like the farther away you are from the creative director and the core design nucleus of the team, the more disconnected you can be with kind of the vision and the end goal. So having something that, again, whether it's that movie, whether it's that core design in the front of your wiki or G Drive, that you can always kind of point. I've always, in my team, I got so frustrated after 6 months of kind of repeating, the thing is, this is what it's called, this is how it works, that I went like to like Staples and got like I forgot what they call, like a cardboard something, and I printed this stuff out, and then I kind of put it up, right? And we're in a digital age. I went and killed trees and kind of put it up on my desk, and I put it across different teams' cubicles to be like, I want you to look at this every day and let it sink in that this, and every time I come by your desk, this is what we're talking about. Like, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to always refer to this doc or diagram or chart. And again, there's no such thing as like over communicating. I'm sure some people find it annoying, but like, you got to say things 7 times or once a week, right? Because there's information overload, right? There's always new things happening and coming and moving, and you got to repeat yourself. I know I might sound like a broken record, but like, the bigger the team, the more people on it, the more moving parts. Guaranteed, the thing you're saying that you've heard yourself say for the 200th time might be the first time that person's hearing it, right? And it kind of clicks and resonates. Oh, I didn't know about that. Well, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Take it away. Sandra, go for it.
I think John really like covered it for me at least. Yeah, just like I think something that always will work is visuals and something short. Ooh, that looks good. So visual, short, and sweet is always gonna be like the best way to like get the idea across. Definitely something I had to learn because I come from a writing background, so I would write a lot. It's too long, no one understands it, and then when I sit down with everyone and I'm like, okay, let's make this work, they come back with me with work that isn't what we had gone over because they just were overloaded, like you said, like too much information. If I had just mocked it up myself, made it very sweet and simple with like 3 lines of like explaining how it works, they would have been able to understand what they needed. So yeah, visuals, very good.
What do you got, Elaine?
Yeah, exactly what Sandra said. I have learned after being on the team to be able to read what communication style fits best with the person that I'm talking to. So my style of communicating to design and executives is one way versus engineering. Engineering likes short and sweet, straight to the point. Take me point A, point B, point C, bullet points. And the executives like to see this beautiful put together document where you went through all of the avenues of possibilities and showed them pictures of what they may look like, and trying to figure that out. It also has to deal with me being a people person. So I love to work with all of my teammates, but I try to get to know them a little bit on a personal basis so that I can understand how to best communicate with them. So I've been able to do that. Some people are more resistant than others because they're introverted versus extroverted, but that has allowed me to easily have conversations now with everybody on my team. I could easily go to my engineers, easily go to artists, easily go to the CEO and ask stuff, talk about random stuff too, just because I've built a little bit of a relationship with everyone on different levels, and just understand who they are as people. Because at the end of the day, we're people. We're not our jobs. I am Elaine, and I have, my life experiences, and I bring that along with me. So if you can connect with me, like, I will better be able to serve you, and I'll be able to communicate with you better, because we have I don't know, like, I haven't put up a wall, right? Because I feel like our work also allows us to put these walls up, because it's like I have to be very professional. I can't really show you who I really am, but to me, I'm the same person, whether I'm at work or whether I am at a festival, whether I'm at home. I'm the same all around. So I think like allowing to see people past their job and seeing who they are allows you to build trust, which then allows you to be an effective communicator and also be transparent when somebody perhaps crosses a line and you need to bring something to their attention. For example, for me, that has been the case, like being the woman in my team. If a dude says something out of place, or if I feel like, they perhaps came at me in a disrespectful way or whatever it may be, having that personal relationship, even though that may be very small, will makes me feel comfortable, where I can send them a message and be like, hey, like, what you said hurt me, or like, I really felt disrespected by what you said. Let's improve our communication so that it doesn't happen again. um because I really love to work with you and I want us to be a team. Like, being able to have those conversations on the sidelines has also allowed me to mesh better with my team, because they respect me and they value me and my opinion, because I have had those moments of personal contact with them outside of team meetings and things like that. But everybody's different, so you have to really be careful. Like the way that I talk to my friend, the artist who I have a relationship with, and like, we're cool with each other, and I can definitely get outside that professional like bubble with him. I wouldn't talk to the CEO like that. You really have to be careful in figuring out those boundaries and respecting people's space, respecting people's perspectives. Sometimes they put up a wall for a reason.
Mhm.
They want to protect themselves from something that you're not privy to. Like, be mindful of that.
Yeah, I want to add that that's super wonderful when you can build that like external or outer work layer kind of connection, right? Because just build that trust. And like, I know I've been on teams where I have like-minded individuals, or not even like-minded individuals, but like, we all have our diverse backgrounds, but you know having some similar interests, being able to go out and have lunch and talk about other things other than work, uh hang out, you know extracurricular activities, right? But to kind of build that rapport personally definitely makes a stronger team, right? Where then you can kind of, when things are hitting the fan, to Elaine's point, you can kind of be more raw or you can be yourself, right? And just speak to each other straight up. Again, doesn't apply to everybody, especially people higher in the chain. But when you're in the trenches working with people, and you could just be real with each other because you're trying to get this thing done, it definitely builds a stronger team and leads to a better product, right? Like, nine times out of ten. um, I've been onboarding or trying to be a part of a team completely remotely during the pandemic. So I'm missing the opportunities of being in an office, going out to lunch, getting coffee together, walking to work, walking to the office, and establishing that kind of like casual connection. And it's been hard, but kudos to the team for making themselves available, where I get to book their time for one-on-one Zoom meetings. It's a big team, big company, but people have been, like you said, more human, right? Like, the pandemic has kind of let you be more human and more vulnerable, right? Like, I'm meeting you guys for the first time, and here you are. You're seeing my house. I'm seeing your house. You're seeing my wife bring some little delicious comida because her husband's like working it. And it's wonderful, bro. It's like, oh, like I instantly have kind of a somewhat more comfortable disposition with you guys, and it kind of lets us be more real. Definitely not trying to cross any boundaries, but I think definitely from a creative perspective, it definitely fosters better better juices and mojo to like kind of get some ideas out there, or spitball or whiteboard or what have you. So there's definitely plus 1,000 to what Elaine and Sandra was saying with like building a personal bridge somehow, right? Like people, there's boundaries to that for sure.
Definitely. Thanks, y'all. I think that's the go for it. Go for it, Sandra.
Sorry.
No, go for
Just
it.
to add a little bit to it, because it's totally true. Like, it's always great to form those personal relationships with everyone. Although I will say, when I first started at Dots, or working anywhere, because it's a smaller company, there were already relationships there, and designers who are already friends with other designers will talk to those designers over you. So in a way, you really have to be conscious of like, this person is my friend, this person I'm not that friendly with, but I still respect them and I want to hear their voice and I'm going to empower them. So Dots is not it's the ratio of men is higher. And oftentimes I think as women especially, you're kind of conditioned to let people talk and not interrupt them at all. So in the end, there's still an issue where a lot of men will talk way more than the women. And that's because they don't have nothing to say. It's because it's more difficult to interrupt people. And especially on Zoom, now that there is no way of like seeing people's body language, it was a bit of a hassle, like, or a learning curve to try and give your opinion out there, put it out there when people are taking turns talking. But then someone's quicker than you and then they don't hear it. And then the conversation moves on and it becomes like a little awkward. So yeah, be friendly, but make sure you're not leaving people out, especially if that person is a minority or a woman, etc.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the value or the presence of having Juan here, right? And I find that vital in this Zoom environment, especially in a team. Whoever wants to wear that hat, right? Whoever booked the meeting should wear the hat, but like, sometimes it falls on leadership or producer or whatever to be deliberate and try to make sure everybody's included, everybody gets a turn. And there even is some psychology to it, right? Like I'm still building on that muscle to kind of watch people and kind of pick up on the body language and okay. And it takes time to get to know it, but like, okay, Sandra's thinking about something. I'll make sure I'm gonna ask her in a few seconds if she got something to add, right? Like it's there's a new world of Zoom etiquette that I'm still learning, but I really appreciate again having a moderator to kind of go around and make sure everybody's included, heard, and feels invited, right? Like I myself, I'm kind of a deep thinker. So to be invited, hey, John, you got something to say? It's like, oh, okay, it's my turn. Cool. Let me talk about something. It's super valuable. Like you said, a lot of us are conditioned to sit, think, and maybe not say anything, right? Like for whatever reason, for whatever background or experiences we have. And to be invited, to be included, to create that space is so valuable. And part of the benefit of having a diverse team.
Definitely.
And it comes with being Latino too, that like, at least for me, I'm very expressive. I talk with my hands. And sometimes as a woman too, being in a room, like Sandra said, where people may talk over me and like finding that right time to butt in. Also having the courage of when somebody tries to cut me off, be like, oh, excuse me, let me just finish. Let me finish my thought so that I can get it all out there, and then have the person come in and say what they wanted to say. Like that has been tough to refine that to being like, hey, like let me just like let me just put it all out there first, like everybody else is doing, because you don't want to be looked at as that, oh, like, here, there's that attitude. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, no, everybody's voice is valuable, everybody's voice needs to be heard. So let's do that for each other. Just as I am doing it for you, allowing you to speak, let me finish my sentence, let me finish my thought before you come and counter it, or before you want to add to it. Make me feel like I am just as valuable, and that my opinion is just as worthy to be heard as yours. And I think that also is something that we're grappling with, as women in the industry, as Latina women in the industry, because we are like the minority of the minority of the minority. Like, I think at the IGDA survey, like, women designers in games is like 1% or less. It's like really tiny. So Sandra and I are unicorns in the industry. So it's paving the way for ourselves, and putting ourselves out there, but also paving the way for all the women like us who are going to be joining the industry in the next 1 to 5 years, and making sure that they feel empowered by hearing our stories. That's why it's so important for us to be part of these panels, and to be given these opportunities for us to talk about our experiences, so that they can be encouraged and they can be resilient, and they can, you know, put their foot down when they need to, because that's also important too. And not just for women, for men too. Because I know that there are some people out there whose personality is to let everybody speak before they speak. So also encouraging them to get outside of their comfort zone and their box, and voice their opinions too, and make everybody feel welcome in the spaces that we are in. And that's super valuable to us, right? Because we are communities. Every studio is their own community. And I bring my community, right, of being involved in Latinx and gaming, being involved in IGDA, and all these other things. I'm bringing all of that with me at every place that I go. So trying to be the positive change you want to be too, in your work is important, and never lose sight of that. Like, never lose sight of who you are just because of where the place that you're at. I'm still Puerto Rican. I'm still gonna bring the saxophone. It doesn't matter if I am in a little indie studio or a big AAA with lots of people who don't look like me, lots of dudes. Doesn't matter. I'm still gonna be me, and that's what you're gonna get, and that's what makes it beautiful. Like, that we are all in the places that we're at, and we can bring that little piece of space into our teams and the projects that we're in.
Definitely.
I love that. I love like the call specifically to be assertive for all of us, right? Like there's that balance, but I think I'll speak personally for myself. I shy away from it, right? And so I love that we're calling that out to allow yourself to be brave and to be assertive when you're in the middle of a solid thought, right? Or you got this kind of thing you're trying to get out there, to be assertive, to be like, pardon me, I wasn't done. Let me just finish real quick, right? And then you go, kind of thing. That's something that's not muscle memory to me yet, but I love that we're calling that out, and I wanna work on that, right? To be assertive, be like, hold on, I'm not done. And on the flip side too, to acknowledge when you kind of jump the gun on someone and cut someone off, to be like, oh my bad, I didn't mean to cut you off. You finish what you were saying, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned, like, in just doing organizing stuff in college, I think it's like this idea of like stepping up and stepping aside that we use a lot, which is like, if you're a shy person, like, try to make yourself go out there, try to push yourself to step up and share your ideas, because like, especially if you're like a junior person, I would say it's like, people, like, you have new stuff to share it. It's like, maybe you have bad ideas, maybe you have good ideas, you won't know unless you share it. So just put yourself out there. And then for the folks who are, especially like guys at studios too, like the homies, like, if y'all are out there talking like half of the meetings, look around you. Look at the space, like, who's around you that's not speaking too much. How can you elevate them to be like, oh, I think so and so had something to say, or like, is there any other way you can include folks? Obviously, respectfully, you don't want to put people on the spot, but just being mindful of that as you're in these spaces, because like, like, at the end of the day, it's all about communication. So seeing how you could, improve that for yourself, or use your position of power to elevate other people, super important. For sure.
100%. I think it's important to read the room. And actually, I mean, now perhaps in the age of Zoom and the pandemic, it's not as easy, but like, when we return back to being face to face, like, read the room, like see who has their head down, whose body language is showing you that they want to say something, but they're reserving it. And be an ally to those folks. And when there's a spot, be like, hey, like, I think so and so had something to say, that give them that opportunity. Because sometimes they need that little push and they need that little space. And you can be that change for them. And then they can feel empowered from then on forward, or maybe with time, to speak for themselves. And that was all because you helped them get there. And I've seen it happen in real time, even at my studio. I've seen that happen. Somebody who was really, really shy, who didn't want to talk in meetings, and they outside of meetings would say, I really should have said something. I
Hmm.
really had a good point. I was like, bro, I got you next time, like in next meeting, I got you. And that's what we did. And I let my other teammates know, hey, like so and so has a hard time voicing their opinion, but if you see them, you know looking pensive, like nudge them so that they can have an opportunity. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden we rallied together for this guy, and like he can now voice his concerns. And it's wonderful to see that growth, because it really makes you feel like you did something, you helped out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zoom is a great. I mean, whatever program has a mechanism where, like, even on the low, I'll chat with somebody like directly. Yo, mention this or say that, right? Like, to give that little virtual nudge, for sure. But I think I've even seen it in the person who was timid to speak, kind of emulate what he or she sees, and be that champion or ally for the next person when they come in, right? And that's wonderful to see.
Yeah, and I think that we, as a society, as human beings, like we need that. Like we need more of that, more compassion, more empathy, more willingness to love on each other,
Hmm.
and like be there for each other. We need that camaraderie. And that's part of just being a good human. Just be a good person to people around you, and you will see how that changes the environment around you, and how that changes how people respond to you. Um, all of a sudden you will start seeing people be more open and vulnerable to you and trusting you and telling you things, because you built that trust and that comfortability with them, and it was all because you stepped up and you made them feel valuable. And that's across the board, at work, at in our friendships, like in our
Hmm.
communities, wherever we're involved. Like that's the whole point. Like you literally have the power to change people's lives just by existing. So do something with it, help people out where you can, help them feel heard, like love on them, if you've seen them down, like be like, hey, like what's up? Like and be affirmative and encouraging. Like I love celebrating my friends when I see them getting speaker announcements on Twitter and stuff. I'm like, hell yeah, like I'm celebrating with you, 'cause I'm so joyful for all this stuff that you're going through. And also at work, like recognizing somebody's putting in the work and doing a good job, and being like, bro, that was awesome, like that's super cool, like I'm so proud of you, like thanks for doing that for me. Like let's be more like good to each other, and not just be like nudging people when their work isn't good. You know what I mean? Be like,
Hmm.
oh well, I have a suggestion for your design, or I think we should do it this way. Like instead of being that all the time, like let's encourage each other, and like sandwich our critiques, being like, yo, I love what you did
Sandwich.
with this, but I didn't so like this, but I did like this. That way you're building people up in your critiques, instead of them feeling combative or offended or whatever it may be. But I think we need more of that across the board. Like let's encourage each other, and like
Amen.
call out good work when we see it, because sometimes like people won't hear it ever.
Hmm.
And you can be that person that like brightens up their day or their whole week or their whole month, because you said, bro, like you did a good job, like I'm rooting for you. If you need help, I'm here. I have resources, whatever you need. Like that's the type of, like, I don't know, like that's the type of spirit that comes, I feel like it comes from like our culture, at least for
Hmm.
me. That comes straight up from Puerto Rico. Like it was amazing for me to see when I moved here to the States when I was younger. Like in Puerto Rico, you get lost, you can stop by at a store and ask somebody, hey bro, like I'm lost, how you doing today, like how's everything, I'm lost, can you point me in the right direction? And people will be like, yeah, of course, like you turn left right here, blah blah blah, and then you'll see it right there. It's so easy to communicate and help people. But here, like it was so scary to get lost somewhere, and my dad being like, do you know where this place is? And the people be like, I don't know what you're talking about, like, sorry, like, go on your merry way. Like, it was so weird. But I love that I can bring that part of me, that cultural part of me, to my team, where I can be everybody's cheerleader, because that's what it's all about to me. I want to build people up. I want them to reach bigger heights. Like, I want them to do their best work. And in my life, what I've seen is when I'm encouraged, I do better. Like, I come up with better ideas because I feel like, hyped up, like fired up, because somebody valued me. So I think that as designers and and game developers, we need more of that. And I guarantee that our industry and our communities are going to be so much better if we just value each other more.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, like, I love everything about that. The same way that we work for the player to make them feel rewarded and celebrated so that they can keep going in our game, you know, we miss a great opportunity to turn that talent and skill and desire internally amongst our peers and ourselves 1 billion%, right? Like, we're very quick to criticize something that doesn't feel good, and maybe not as naturally inclinated towards celebrating something that feels awesome, right? Or is almost there, right? And calling out people that led to make that happen. That's a wonderful feeling, right? Like I know coming into a team and not seeing people like myself or being new blood on the team, um, there's something to be said for being led to be felt like a part of the team, right? Like I suffered a lot in my career, even maybe to this day, from like imposter syndrome, right? Like, oh man, how'd I get here? I got lucky. I don't know. It's a mistake. But to get it board anywhere and have a teammate, have a senior, a peer, whatever, tell you like, hey, you're here now. You're a part of us. We're gonna build this game together with you because you're here. Our game is gonna be that much better. Speak up. We brought you here because we need your perspective. And being recognized, like you said, Elaine, like it feels so nice when you're like lost and desperate, like, where do I go? How do I get there? And somebody's like, Jonas said, I don't know, man, figure it out, right? Or I'd be like, yo, I don't know, but let's figure it out together. Let me help you. Or be like, or kind of reaffirm, bro, don't worry about it. It doesn't make sense today. We're gonna figure it out tomorrow, right? Or like, hey, I'm gonna make time at this time. Let's book a meeting and we'll talk through it, right? But just feeling a part of the tribe, right? Whether that's design team, discipline team, greater team, right? Like, or hey, we're all game developers, right? We're already part of the game developer tribe, right? Hey, we're Latinx in gaming, right? Like, just feeling like you belong, you have a place, is such a wonderful feeling that empowers and promotes creativity, right? Like, it just can't help but to kind of gush out of you when you're in that space.
Definitely. Thanks, y'all. All right, on to number 8. How has the pandemic changed working your day to day? I think we might have covered a little bit of this for sure. But how are you staying collaborative despite that? And we could start off with you, Sandra, if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah, I think we've already mentioned a couple ways. I think for me, at first everyone's really shy about making Zoom meetings out of nowhere. But now when the conversation's getting long on Slack, because a lot of things just get lost in Slack, we try to just be like, hey guys, here's my Zoom meeting. I sit there for 5 minutes alone for a bit, but then everyone starts coming in. um, so yeah, just doing that, just like so that we can talk for at least like a couple minutes to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Because when you're writing things down, things get very chaotic, and like the points you want to make get lost, and the changes that you want to happen get lost, and everyone is confused. Um, I used to always look over, well, we all used to huddle around people's desks and like see their work in real time, especially for like the visual designers. We'd be like, hey, what if you made this a different color, or if you changed the shadows here, or if the design had like a different pattern on it. So we just gather at people's desks. But now we just like, we don't do that anymore, which is a little sad. But there are times when the visual designer will share their screen and like show us in real time, and we are able to make that same emulate that same thing, I think. And I haven't used the annotate stuff that you mentioned, John, but I feel like I need to get on this. I think a couple people I've seen them try it, but I haven't tried it myself.
It's
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off. It's just like when you're sharing the screen, it's an option you get. I don't know if like the person who makes the room has to allow it, but I think it's on by
Ooh.
default. But definitely do it. It's super fun, and you'll want to buy like a Wacom afterwards.
I'll have to look into it. But yeah, just doing like random Zoom meetings, putting things in bullet points in Slack to make sure everyone got all the takeaways from the meeting, even if they weren't present. And yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you. What do you got, Elaine?
Not much, to be honest. I think my saving grace has been like the group direct messages on Slack. So getting like all the designers in there so we could talk together, and getting engineers and myself together to like discuss stuff. We do have like a random channel on our Slack, and like a studio channel, and that's where we can talk about like non-work related things. So people will find like cool links about stuff relating to something that we're working on at the studio, or just like random weird stuff that's happening in the world. So that has kept me sane and working day to day. But luckily for us in our studio, our CEO is cool with us like working throughout the day, even if that means if you want to work a bulk of your time, in the day, take a break in the afternoon, and then come back in the evening. Like, he's cool about you shifting around your hours so that you just need to get your work done. As long as you get your work done, like, if you want to, like, I'm very efficient at night. I'm a night owl. So, like, I will like not like take a break during the middle of the day, and then just put in work from like 8 to 11, because that's where I do my best. My creative juice comes out at night. So it's nice to be able to have that flexibility working from home, where I can get to do that. So that's been really helpful for me as a creative, just because I can maximize my day better, to be honest with you, because it was harder with me 9 to 5 having creative juice, when I knew that during the day, like, I don't get my juice. I don't. So my ideas would actually come when I used to go back home, and I used to just jot them down in my design notebook and then come back the next day and work on them. So it's been nice to be able to have that flexibility. But of course, it's hard when, everybody else is online from an X time to an X time. So sometimes I can't talk to people until the next day and stuff. So I just need to prep a lot more now with working from home. But it hasn't really changed the way that I work on a day-to-day basis. Everything is the same. And we're very lucky to be working in games where everything's up in the cloud and I have access to everything all the time. I could literally go back home to Puerto Rico and stay at my grandparents and make the game anyway. Like, it's really nice to be able to have that option as a game designer, to be able to work anywhere, really. So the pandemic really hasn't changed much aside from the fact that we're not at the studio seeing everybody face to face, which I do miss. But at the same time, I like being alone. I like
Like the flexibility.
yes,
Mhm.
I'm one of those people where I love being around people, but I love having my own space. And I like the fact that I can talk to people when it's needed, and I can just stay away and just be by myself. That's just how I get my creative juices flowing. It's hard for me to concentrate when there's a lot of distractions. And that's what I felt like at my studio. As much as I loved everybody, I got distracted so much, like a lot. And you would see people literally take walks every hour to stretch their legs. And every time somebody walked by, because I was like, right, my desk was right by the door, I was distracted. or seeing like my one of the engineers sat next to me, and as he worked, he always had an anime up. So it was like always flashing stuff on the corner of my eye, and I'm just like, what's going on? So I would get distracted by that too, and people coming by and be like, "Hey, Elaine, how are you? What's up?" Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, "Ah, I love y'all, but I can't do my job efficiently until y'all leave." So I used
Sure.
to often stay a little bit later until everybody left to get some work done. But it's been nice to have no distractions for sure. But now with the elections, this week has been very distracting.
Well, that is right. That is correct. What do you got, John?
Yeah, man, the pandemic, there's obviously good and bad with everything. I definitely miss the office space in terms of just the accidental collaborative opportunities that present themselves, right? You're walking around the office, you see something cool on my screen, I see something cool on your screen. Hey, what's that? What are you working on? Let me play it, whatever. Um, it's kind of why game development rocks, right? It's kind of one of the few jobs where you just walk around different people's desks and something awesome's happening. You're like, oh, what's that? Plop in and play, or talk about it, or go for a walk, or go play in an arcade or something. I definitely miss that, right? And so there's, you guys kind of touched on it a little bit, that everything now requires a lot more preparation, right? I'm super go with the flow, mellow, spontaneous, like things happen when they happen. So it's been a huge learning curve for me to plan ahead, especially now where I'm at. We work with studios kind of in all the different time zones. So I am also a later thinker. My brain doesn't get going until like 10, 11 a.m. But I got people I got to be up and alert for like at 7 a.m., right? And people that I got to stay later for. So having that flexibility, or learning how to be flexible, learning how to use that flexibility, has been something that I've had to learn. In the beginning, it was super easy to kind of, oh my God, I'm everything's home. I got my computer. This is where I hang out, play games, all that. Oh, I'm gonna just check that email, or oh, let me just work on this thing a little bit longer. And then, it's super late. I'm starving. It's dinner time. My wife's upset. Like, yo, I need you. So learning to disconnect and learning to shift those hours around, right? Like I now have a big break in the middle of the day. I have a long lunch where I get out, do some exercise, walk the dog, eat, whatever, and then kind of come back into it and like hone in. I'm kind of similar in that, I need like to get in my zone and get in flow, and it kind of takes me a little bit to get in there. So that's been a huge learning curve, and planning meetings with everybody, making sure that we stay in touch. Some of the tools that my team has put in place to emulate that kind of office feel has been, we have like daily coffee meetings at a certain time where it's optional. You can jump in there, and I've seen most teams take advantage of it to just kind of debug something they're struggling with. Sometimes people just do it to get to know each other, or talk about whatever's popular, movie or election or whatever like that. um, so it's kind of forced and feels awkward at first, but when you realize this is all we got, you kind of you get with it eventually. Like, I'm gonna go check in the coffee meeting, see how it's going. um Plus one, the channels on Slack. It's nice to have random topic channels that you can just plop in and talk about games, movies, food, exercise, what have you. It's super cool to just have an outlet, similar, or like you said, having a Discord open where you can talk with your friends about whatever, right? To kind of stay sane, stay connected, that you're not just working, because it's too easy to kind of keep working. I like what Sandra said, where it's like making the meeting accessible for people that can't make it, right? So you don't get that FOMO, that you don't feel left out. Like, oh man, I'm behind, I missed out. Like, so recording the meetings, taking notes, maybe round robining who's got to take the notes so it's not the same person every time, and then making that available and making that a consistent thing is super nice, right? Like, especially as we all live lives with crazy schedules, as best as we might try, we can't always make that meeting at that time, right? So it's nice to know that the team has your back, that it's recorded, notes taken. They're going to bring you up to speed on things you most likely need to know.
Definitely. Awesome, y'all. Well, I think those are our main questions. So I think for the final question to y'all, do you have any final piece of advice for someone early on in their game design career, trying to get into the industry? Maybe you could also think as like the target audience for this as like maybe seniors in college that are about to, try to join the workforce. Any final piece of advice? We could start with you, Elaine.
Um, I guess this is me speaking from experience too. Like when you start applying to game dev jobs, don't be discouraged by getting rejected. I went through a lot of rejections, a lot, a lot, a lot. And I was very discouraged because I just thought I wasn't enough. So keep knocking on doors, and the right one will open for you when it's the right time. Some people have to wait, a couple of months. Some of my friends ended up waiting a couple of years, but they ended up being at the perfect place. So don't get discouraged by rejections because, it's the probability of you landing your dream job right away is very slim. It's a really competitive industry. There's a lot of amazingly talented people wanting to apply for that same job, and you're competing with a bunch of people. So don't feel like you're not good enough and that you won't make it. You will make it. You may just have to wait a little bit more than others. That's like my biggest advice. And my second advice is stay active. Like plug into like an IGDA chapter, plug into some type of community where you feel like you belong and those are your people. Um, both in games and out of games. Stay connected in both. It helps you be a well-rounded person. And as you are staying active, being part of those communities, getting to know people, expanding your network, you're also, attending events, things like that, and getting to know people. And also making your own games and learning things. I have always found out that making my own little games, being involved in game jams, doing little passion projects here and there, um, signing up for like a Udemy class or a Coursera class that will help me be a better designer. Those are all valuable experiences, and it'll help you set yourself apart from others as you're applying to jobs or things like that. Understanding the pipeline of different disciplines helps a lot because that way you can better communicate to artists and to engineers if you understand their pipeline and what it means for them to get their work done, just like you know how to get your work done as a designer. So be mindful of all those things because all that knowledge will only help you. There's no such thing as too much knowledge. The more you know, the better. So try to be, not saying that you have to learn how to 3D model and you have to learn how to code. I'm not saying any of those things, but just have a general understanding. And if you end up liking those things, like go ahead, like make 3D models, like write your own code on stuff in your spare time, like be willing to grow and learn. I always have found that those people who are willing to grow and learn set themselves up for success. And I'm a go-getter, so I'm talking as somebody whose ultimate goal in industry is to become a creative director. And I understand that to get there, I have to work and I have to work my way up and nothing's going to be handed to me, especially as a minority. And that's an unfortunate reality. So understanding that you need to put in the work and that things are not just going to fall on your lap. Things are not transactional. Things are not going to happen overnight. So don't get discouraged when things don't work, opportunities don't come, keep working at it. And before you know it, you're going to look back and you'll be like, holy crap, like 6 years have passed and now I'm a senior game designer, like that's how life happens. So I just encourage everybody to keep learning, always keep striving to be a better person than you were yesterday as a designer and as a human being.
Awesome. Knowledge is power, y'all. All right, Sandra, what do you got?
I love everything you said, Elaine. Definitely. Even once you have that junior position or wherever you are, you should always keep working. And look for the next opportunity. I guess one of the things that I guess something that I don't have that much experience, to be honest. Like I got hired pretty quickly at my studio, after I graduated. But I think one thing, especially when after seeing like people come into the studio and interviewing and like just being able to compare someone who was applying to my position years ago and seeing them and seeing like maybe where I did succeed. You should definitely, if you're applying to a studio, you should study the studio. You should understand like this type of uh, uh, audience they're trying to get, the game that they're making, and the games that they are making. Um, I think if you're just going to a studio and you're seeing them as like a stepping stone or as some sort of like other, like something that a place you wouldn't want to commit to, it's going to show in your interview because we're going to be asking you those questions. Yeah, just like do your homework, study that, make sure that you're showing your strengths, that you have done your research. You don't have to be someone who loves a certain type of game to work on a game. Um, you just have to be able to like look at it, think about it, and be able to talk about it in a very cohesive way. And it doesn't have to be correct because a lot of people who came in to interview didn't exactly understand, but the people that did succeed were the ones that like understood like what we were trying to do. So those types of things. Also just like I think if you're going into like if you're applying to a mobile studio, and this is very specific, I don't know anything about console or like uh, just developing a game that is released once. If you're going into like mobile, something that you have to keep in mind is like your game designers are very product driven as well. We're always thinking about things like retention, monetization, and just making sure that like you're able to understand like what's the purpose for a feature in the game that in the game in a game in general. And if that game's part of the studio you're applying to, just understanding like what is making that product successful. Like if you're not looking at like what's working for them, and you're not really able to talk about it, where it's like, oh, okay, I guess you understand the mechanics, okay, but like, do you understand what makes people stay and pay and keeps them engaged and keeps them loyal to your game? So yeah, just those types of things.
Awesome. Those are great insights for mobile games, y'all. All right, John, what do you got?
Yeah, totally. That like the hooks that were seen kind of as like mobile only are now definitely permeating their way into every game. So at any scale, it would behoove you to understand those real hooks. Like a lot of people like to hate on some of the things that game developers do in order to drive monetization from their daily active users, right? Or, watch a commercial, right? Like this is the business side. Games are a fantastic creative endeavor, but there's also a big business to kind of keep things running. So you have to understand that. You have to be able to speak to it. There's so many articles online. And to Elaine's point, there's so many communities that weren't around when I was trying to break in, right? I'm going to date myself a little bit. I broke in 2007, right? So this was like Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 days. Unreal 3 was just coming out. And there wasn't as much of a scene or support as there is today, and I love it. I love it that there's Discord channels for all types of game developers. There's YouTube videos that you can teach yourself Unity or Unreal or do whatever. So there's no excuse for you not to keep on grinding and working on your game and finding a community to work on this game on the side. That maybe it may be your thing, or maybe it's the thing that gets you into whatever company you're applying to, because you can speak to the challenges that you experience making your game and how you fix that can very directly correlate to the same types of problems that that studio is looking to fill and the expertise that they're looking to bring on, even if you don't have like professional experience, right? You're making games. You're going through the same problems that we are going to, right? Like we've kind of all touched on earlier, is a designer is a problem solver. They're not an idea person that's gonna make this fantastic RPG game that players play for hundreds and hundreds of hours. You are a problem solver that is a key tool in a team of very different disciplines and mentalities and perspectives and backgrounds, right? And you have to kind of foster that all together. I made a mistake when I was kind of trying to break in, right? I'm from New York and I went to school down in Orlando at Full Sail. So early on, I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to look for work in New York and Orlando. That's where my family is, where I want to live. And this was '07. And there was kind of like, there's definitely not the scene there is today in New York. I'll tell you that for sure. So, I had no experience. I wasn't hearing anything. So I had to look outside of that, right? I had to look in places that I didn't know anybody, right? I had to look in Austin, Texas. I had to look in San Diego. And now there's development studios everywhere. So I always point everybody to this site called Game Dev Map, where you can see every studio around the world and you can see their open positions. And especially in the pandemic, you don't even have to move. You can work anywhere on any team remotely, right? So especially if you speak the language or you have a connection with the culture, right? That all kind of already gives you a leg up. So definitely apply and cast a wide net, and do your homework, to Sandra's point, right? Like know the types of games that that studio is trying to make and be able to speak to it, right? Like as a designer, it is your job to play as many different types of games as possible and have as wide a curiosity about the world as possible, because the challenge will be laid out in front of you to be able to speak to a problem or um, explain how something works to somebody that doesn't know how it works. So what I always look for when I'm interviewing someone just kind of breaking in is to be able to be curious and ask questions to see how you think to get to some type of answer, right? I don't want to work with somebody that's like, I don't know, I don't get it, I don't understand, right? Like I want to establish a rapport, somebody that I can bounce ideas off of and can kind of feed me ideas, right? So play as much as possible and be able to explain somehow, right, from your perspective, why doesn't this feel good in a game? What would you do to make it feel better? And extra points if you can implement it on your own in Unity or Unreal. And super gold star if you can like then stream it or record a YouTube video and kind of put it out there, right? Because I love seeing that on resumes where it's like, here's a link to something I've done. Here's videos of me talking through it or a friend talking through it, or here's a podcast, or here's a Twitch stream, right? Like in this day and age, that's like so valuable. And I think a huge tool that wasn't around when I was trying to break in, right? That I just kind of encourage everybody, like, take advantage of all these things that you have access to. Like, you don't need a publisher to get your game out there these days, right? Like, somebody that wants to break in games and isn't making a game on the side is an even bigger unicorn than a Latin game designer.
It's so true. You'd be surprised at the amount of game devs that I have met and my friends who don't have time to make their own games after work because either they're too tired, it's not something they want to do, they're not inspired, and I get it. And I've been in those phases too where it's just like I don't want to work on anything after work. I just want to chill. Um, but I'm currently working on several projects with my friends or like personally and stuff, just because I want to. It's something that I want to do, not because I need to do it. But speaking to John's point, like playing games is critical as being a designer and analyzing the pros and cons, the good and the bad design. That's critical in our work. So that playing games doesn't mean play the games only that you like. It means play the games that you don't think you like, things that you're not attracted to, because that's where you may actually even get inspired, get good ideas from in your own designs. So I try to play everything. And when I mean everything, I mean like I have downloaded some really wonky, crazy games that I would never play. And that doesn't mean I need to play the whole thing through from beginning to end. Just playing 2 to 3 hours of the game gives me the context that I need about its design. So I've played everything this year from like really tiny indie games from itch.io that people have released just because I want to play them, to not triple A, I guess like double A, like they call it triple I, which is like your high end indies. So I've played a bunch of those, and then I've played the big ones, heavy hitters, successful games, like Hades and like Fall Guys, blah blah blah. Like be well rounded when you're looking at the games, and experience them, because the whole idea is for you to archive it in your mind, and figure out what can I adopt from here and there, what can I be inspired by, so that I could come up with good design solutions for my projects, whether that be personal or at work. So you'd be surprised at the amount of like inspiration that you will find just from having played several different types of games all across the board, mobile, PC, like Switch, even board games and card games coming out. All of that stuff like can inspire you in ways you wouldn't believe. And like John said even earlier, watch movies and listen to music that you wouldn't listen to, like go into the rabbit hole of TED Talks like I've been doing, like learn, like be willing to learn and be open to, I don't know, being inspired by things that you don't think you would be inspired. Especially now in the pandemic when we can't go to museums and we can't go traveling. Do your part in still trying to absorb the beauty of our world and the cultures and the societies all around us, and allow that to inspire you and encourage you and motivate you to be a better designer, be a better developer.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Thanks so much, y'all. Thank you to our amazing speakers for bringing the knowledge, sharing trade secrets, breaking NDAs. Just kidding. But for being overall really awesome. I feel very inspired for sure. And I guess sort of as a final thing, is there anything y'all want to plug? Where can people find y'all? We could go off and start with John and just go down the line from what I see. So you could go ahead first, John.
Yeah. So I myself am trying to just be a better ally to people trying to break in, right? And so I'm super happy to be invited on to this platform, this panel, to be alongside Elaine and Sandra and get to know you, Juan, as well. So super appreciative to just be a part of this, because I want to help people kind of break in and learn and have somebody that they can reach out to. So I'm on Twitter. You can see it right there at L Kingpin, and I make myself available to anybody that wants to connect and have somebody to get some insight on doing what I do, and showing them what's available, right? And trying to help them get put on. Currently, what are we doing out here? I think EA has a few jobs open all over the world. So definitely look at the careers page and hit me up if you see anything that resonates with you or that you're interested in. And honestly, I hope to put a podcast together eventually, just with featuring game developers or featuring people in games and picking your brain and just talking about the amazing things we see in our day to day. So whenever that happens, I'll let you guys know, and I would love to invite you guys on there.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So keep an eye out for a podcast, y'all. Next up, we got Sandra.
Yeah, so I also have a Twitter. It's right there, Sanmagia. I feel I'm pretty new to game dev world. But always happy to connect with anyone. I guess I can plug Dots as well. We don't really have any openings right now other than like a high level games director position. So if you want to be one of my many bosses, sure. But if any position opens up with Dots, I am 100% open to talking to anyone and giving any sort of feedback, especially if it's in the game design department. And I can always inquire about other departments. I will say, if you are someone who wants to live in New York City, make games in New York, and work at a company like Dots, which was recently acquired by Take-Two, um, I am more than happy to help in any way I can. Dots does pay a livable wage. You would be able to live in New York City pretty comfortably. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment right now by myself in Brooklyn. And yeah, that's always
Perfect.
happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. Last but not least, Elaine.
Well, my Twitter is there as well, Chulatastic. Don't add me on Instagram, please, because my handles are the same everywhere. But my Instagram is like for my family, my close friends. So yeah, on Twitter, I'm available for anybody to talk about like game design, game development. I even take a peek at people's portfolios and resumes and cover letters. If that's something that you would like help with, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it and give you feedback. I do game design mentorships. Right now I'm about to finish or about to start my winter session, and it's going to end in December. But come January, I'll be releasing information about mentorships. I may be doing them a little bit different next year, just because it's a lot of my time that I need to give for mentorships. But I can plug that maybe, hopefully, I'm going to start doing like game development, game design, like videos on like YouTube, just to teach very beginners how to make games, and really also encouraging designers to learn a little bit more programming, because programming can be scary, but I would like to make programming accessible, even if it comes to like just prototyping, for prototyping purposes, rapid prototyping, being able to teach people how to write code or what is it called, like
Refactor?
refactor it. Thank you. The word slipped me. I was like, it's right at the tip of my tongue. But yeah, like refactor code from tutorials, example projects, and kind of like, I don't know, like just edit them so that they're useful for what you're trying to make. So that's something that I would really like to do next year. So maybe I will weave that into somehow with my mentorships. Maybe not take mentorships as personal like I did this year, but instead do more like Q&As and forums and things like that with that video series. I'm not sure if I will have the time to do that, but that's something that I really, really want to do. Plugging in though, I will be doing a master class with Indie Game Business. They're hosting this December like online conference thingy. So I will be doing a master class, very, very cheap. It's like $50. And it's a design class for, it's a game development class for designers. So it's like testing that whole idea of teaching code to people that don't code. So we'll see how that goes, but I will definitely tweet about that as information comes so that people can enroll and, learn Unity game development without being scared of programming. And of course, I have to plug in Latinx and gaming. So we're a community here for all of our Latinx game industry friends from all over, whether it's journalism, esports, game dev, legal, you name it, we're here for you. So definitely come join us. We love to serve you and be part of shining a spotlight on you and your work.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Go follow all these amazing people. That's our panel, and I hope y'all learned as much as I did. I hope y'all feel as inspired as I do, and we'll catch you at the next one. All right. Later, y'all. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.